I went from literally the only messages on my answering machine my entire life had been from my mom. And now, within, a week, there were just dozens of calls from all of these men who wanted to, were interested in this little skinny shit. I'm gonna watch my language, God, I'm so sorry. So yeah, no, I mean, but that's gay culture. I had no exposure to gay culture in the Mormon church or in Texas. I didn't know that there were like other kinds of ways of being an attractive man. And my friend Ryan, who's my best friend, also didn't check the boxes. He was like husky and very hairy and Latin, and he had a big mustache. And
so like a daddy.
He was like, no, get it right. He was a bear. But he too, I also saw him. He came out to me the summer before I did. He was my best friend growing up. I talk a lot about him in the book. Some people here might know him. And I did watch him come out, find his people, find out that he could be, a big husky guy and hairy and mustache, and people thought he was hot. It was so exciting to be gay and to figure out that it was okay to be really different and diverse in our own ways in the gay community.
So was that fair to say that it was in the process of going out into gay bars and realizing that you were a twink that maybe for the first time you realized you were attractive?
Yeah, I was like the princess at West Hollywood. I'm not gonna lie. If I listed the names of the people who were calling my phone, but I don't know what we're getting at here. But it was like a crazy time. I think my grades slumped at UCLA's film school, but you can take the Mormon kid out of church, but you can't take the Mormon out of him. It still would take like years to lose my virginity. It's so pathetic. It was a little sad.
And you were into the comfortable sex, which I would label as sad.
Yeah, I mean, I tell some of these stories. I also just feel I fall in love deeply, and so in that way, I was waiting. I was waiting for the right person, and eventually, I knew who that person was, and eventually, at my mom's behest, he started to come around. Go figure. And I think I had pretty good taste. He eventually came around when he was my first boyfriend, and he's gone on to do wonderful things.
And so we're talking about the early 90s, being gay, having sex. How much was, obviously AIDS was unavoidable, but how much did you know about it? Did you know that it was sexually transmitted at that point?
Yes. No, my mom was an immunologist who became a flow cytometrist, which meant what her job was to count T cells. That became a very valuable job. That used to be a cancer thing. It was mostly cancer she was looking at and trying to help doctors get these boys healthy and back to their families. And now, one of the reasons that we were transferred out of Texas, away from the Mormon church, and to Central California, one, because my mom fell in love with and started having an affair with a much younger, how dare she, hottie in the army. And they got orders. He was also in medicine to ship out to Fort Ord, which is just below San Francisco, up there in Monterey. And part of her job was now to try and figure out why these heterosexual army soldiers were starting to die of AIDS. And so it was I'm 13, 14, and the dining room table conversations, though I'm deeply in the closet still, are about how quickly these men are dying and how there's nothing she seems to be able to do to help keep them alive. And though my mom was homophobic, family came first always. And you could feel the conversations around the table, the heartbreak in them, as one after the other of these boys lost their lives.
And so that was about a decade before you came out. After you came out, what kind of discussions did you have about HIV with her?
Well, I mean, my mom was very frank. She said, if you, well, I don't know if this is PC, but it's what she said. She said, if you ever get it, it won't kill you because I will. And I mean, I think she at that point knew, when I came out, we knew what it was. We knew how you got it. She also knew what it is you need to do not to get it. I also had great mentors. I mean, part of the wonderful thing about old West Hollywood and those familial groups you made is most often the leaders of those groups, who were usually like a decade or two older, they were taking folks under their wings, and they were the ones who I was with were teaching us on our first steps into West Hollywood how to use a condom, why to use it, how to keep yourself safe, when to get tested. It was a scary time, but there was also something quite lovely and familial about all of that. And they did keep us safe, for the most part. There were some leaders of little families that had made other things the priority. And you watched those groups dwindle, and you watched them disappear.
And that sounds so like nice, that community. I don't know that I see that existing anymore.
I don't know, because I'm not out there. I'm busy changing diapers and and supporting my husband on the road. And I think I also don't see the spaces, at least in the gay ghettos, the ones that still do exist. That's also dwindling in many parts of the world, where those can even exist. It does seem to me that you go to the gay area to have fun. Because and that's partly our successes in the gay rights movement, is that not yet in most states, but in California, along the coasts, in many states, you can't get fired anymore for being gay. You can't get kicked out of your home anymore. It's relatively safe to be gay and accepting to be gay, so you don't need the ghetto or the community in the way we really needed it back then. And so it means some of the spaces where we would congregate, the coffee shops. I mean, the Abbey was a coffee shop. And the man at the counter, I'm forgetting his name, but he's still there, Latin guy, he called us all his little children. And he knew us by name, and he would ask if we talked to our parents, he'd ask if we were okay. If somebody was looking a little hungry, he'd slip them a piece of chocolate cake. And we just had those spaces. There were several coffee shops around, and and those were particularly valuable for the kids who were under 21, like me, to find that family. So it doesn't feel like it when I go out to West Hollywood or even Pride anymore, that those same family units exist. And yes, that is sad, and I hope that there's places that people are finding to have those safe spaces, but it's also a testament to some of the work that we've done, that we don't need them as much as we used to.
But I think like the testament to like the work we've done is most evident in like the people who look like us, right? Like the white gay men. Because like in terms of like AIDS, HIV/AIDS as an example, like the rates for people of color, for trans folks, for people in southern states, they are absurd. And like I would argue that epidemic is still going. And I asked about community because in the flow of information, about how much you knew, because there's words like undetectable, which we know they mean. It means you can't spread the virus if you're positive, but your viral load is so low you cannot transmit it. And yet I still see stigma against HIV positive men who are undetectable, and we like avoid them. And so I don't see people saying like, "Hey, Lance, it's fine."
Wait, say that last part again?
I don't see us spreading information accurately, even though it exists. I don't see it.
I mean, I try.
Yeah.
I do try. I do think, listen, the early gay communities and the early gay areas were absolutely racist and misogynist. It's true. I mean, you went to San Francisco and you couldn't get into a gay bar if you're black. You went to the Castro, and if a woman walked down the street, you get harassed. We, in the gay community, have had a lot of soul searching to do just to get the LGBT together. And I don't disagree with you that there's still more work to be done there. I try my best. I think that when we're telling our stories out there, that they need to start being as diverse as we are as a community. For me, that means I shouldn't be writing and producing and directing them all. It means like on When We Rise that I needed to and did hire writers and producers and directors who are as diverse as our community is to share those stories authentically. I see that there's progress there, but I don't think we're quite there yet. What upsets me, what I'm having a hard time with, and I certainly see it in the United Kingdom right now, and a little bit here, is that we've begun to turn. The LGB in some places has begun to turn again on the T. And you hear some of the language, especially in the UK and around the world right now. I'm not sure where people are here in this country. That is language borrowed from some of the most transphobic places and conservative think tanks in the United States and being used against trans people. And I'm not saying that LGBs stand up for them in the way that we ought to, so that we can keep our coalition together. And it worries me, because if we don't have that coalition of LGBTQ, I'm one of the guys who says, give me every freaking letter there is. I want the entire alphabet, and then maybe we'll be strong enough as a community to win elections and to keep people like Trump from being elected and rolling back those rights. But I also want to hear the anger and hear the support from the LGBs when trans people, and particularly trans people of color, are having their rights stripped away. I want to hear it. Because it's the right thing to do, because we are a family, we are a coalition, but also, baby, I stepped out of filmmaking for 5 years, as some know, to fight for marriage equality. And in that fight, I'll tell you what, I'll never forget, in that first March on Washington in 2009, and the theme of that march, let's make no mistake, Prop 8 lit that thing up. We were talking about marriage, and we wanted it in all 50 states. And that entire front row group, really, of people, of the whole 200,000 who showed up, were trans. Our trans brothers and sisters showed up to fight for marriage equality for us. Many of them didn't need that. It wasn't their issue. So why the hell why don't we have their backs in a vocal, strong way when their rights are being stripped away, when we hear this divisive language, when we hear around the world, be careful because it will come back here, the LGB saying, unload the T's. That's a thing we're hearing. So,
when you say we are hearing that, is that in the UK or in general?
Around the world. I think that here, I'm curious. I'd be curious to hear from people here. Here, I think, we've built those coalitions, and I hope that they're holding together strong, but they're not elsewhere. And if they're falling apart in a place like the UK, which has been so far ahead of the US for so long on LGBT issues, that can come back to haunt us here. And it doesn't take much before you start buying in to what you see a Trump administration doing. And saying, you know what, would we be better off like Barney Frank said? Bless him, but not for this. Wouldn't we be better off just to fight for the LGBTs for a while? And I say, no, I don't think so. My philosophy speaks to what you were just talking about, which is we are so far from being at the place where there's an equal playing field for all. Not only do we need the LGBTs to win, but we also need to make sure that we're doing what Harvey Milk taught us, and what we learned in the marriage equality fight, which is making sure we're building coalitions with other minority groups that are fighting for their rights as well, and showing up for their efforts in very practical ways, putting our boots on the ground and our money in their pockets when they start fighting for their causes. And yes, do it visibly, do it gay, put a big gay button on as you're doing it so they know that we're a community and that we're a family. But that work has to happen, and those coalitions have to coalesce and come together, or a plurality of mostly, usually, straight white men can come together and rule. Because divided, we will fall.
I love that. I want to move to a couple audience questions before we're out of time. One is by a straight person, if you don't mind me asking that. Is anybody okay with that? An objection in the back. Okay. Right, so it says, as a cisgender heterosexual woman and an LGBT ally, sometimes it is not my story that I'm sharing, but the stories of people I know, and I feel like I somehow am stealing something that is not mine. Any words about the ethical use of other people's stories? I love that question.
Well, I can't object. I've made a career out of it. But these are my opinions, right? I do think the most powerful story is our own, and so if there's one that intersects with yours, I think that's probably the most powerful one. But failing that, I always say use other people's stories. Certainly, just try and be honest about them and speak from the heart. When you're doing that, I think we're in good shape. It's so weird not to know who asked the question. I feel like this is like a game show. Oh, there you go. I mean, can they ask the questions, or have you point them out?
I don't know. It's kind of like about me, you know.
Okay.
How do you feel about the answer? We need as many more of our stories told. So please tell us. I see the question.
That was great.
Okay, do you want a fun question or a serious question?
I don't care. I'm so sick of you.
Oh, let's see the audience. You want a fun? Yay.
Fun.
Serious? Ooh.
Maybe next.
It's been so serious.
Okay, we're doing fun. Lance, what happened to the pickup truck you're restoring?
That's not funny.
What does that mean?
It's beautiful.
I don't know, my business manager's here. She knows what happened to it. Where is it? My cousin Lynn.
Oh, from the book. Oh, this was the end of the book. So
Yeah.
the book.
Yeah, so in the book. I restored it. It was it's gorgeous. It's restored. My cousin Lynn gifted me the family truck before I left town, left Texarkana after that big visit, and it was a piece of crap. I mean, it was a junker, and so I think we spent a lot of money restoring it. But then I moved to London, and well, I'm not taking a 1965 GMC pickup truck, no matter how gorgeous, candy, apple, red, and chrome it is. And so I've lent it to Gus Van Sant. So if you see it, so a guy kind of hunched over, driving a red pickup truck. That's Gus.
Awesome. And then I think this is prescient since Mother's Day is coming up, which is that this person lost their mother to ovarian cancer, and it's difficult. And they want to say, how do they continue to celebrate your mother in your own life?
You keep. Writing this book is the big thing for me, but I think we keep our family members alive by sharing their stories. I love that as I walk down the hallway holding my son at home, there are pictures just all over the walls. I like framing pictures. And there's one of his Grandma Ann. And he already knows because of how I say, there's Grandma Ann, and I'm excited. And he knows her face. So he knows now whenever he sees Grandma Ann, he puts his hand and slaps on the face and is like, Grandma Ann. And he knows her. I never met my grandma Cokie. And Cokie is really who I inherited everything from. Cokie raised 9 kids in the poorest city in America, Lake Providence, Louisiana, on the south side of the river. She was one of the only white tenant farmers on the south side of the river in Lake Providence, Louisiana. And she raised these 9 kids by herself. And she never let my mom believe that she couldn't achieve whatever she wanted. I never met her, but boy, I inherited all of that. Partly because of what she passed to my mom and what my mom treasured of her stories and passed to me. So my mom's still alive. I don't care what you say. She's alive in every tradition that I pass on.
I love that. Last question, then we'll let you go. The majority of the people in this room got to know you because of your TV and film work. Milk, J. Edgar Hoover, When We Arise. What is next for you on that front?
Oh boy. There's a bunch now that I'm, not doing the political work as much anymore. I'm writing a lot, and one is a way of me adding to something. Well, I wrote a TV show called Big Love for years on HBO, which in its own way was addressing Mormon fundamentalism and polygamy And I hope there's no HBO executives in here. I just always thought it was not honest. And we searched for so long for a family that looked like the family depicted in that show that was built on love. And we never found it. It was always a sense of duty that brought people into polygamy, a duty to God, and it was a lot about pushing down people's own needs, and it felt abusive. I'm sorry, it felt really abusive to women. And so I am now doing a 10-hour miniseries on FX based on the book Under the Banner of Heaven, which does a deep dive into Mormon fundamentalism and holds it accountable for what it's done to women. So stay tuned for that, and my dear friends at the Mormon Church will have one more reason to come after me.